Okay, awesome. Kirsten, thank you for joining the show. Do you want to just take a sec, kind of introduce yourself, a little brief
A
kind
little
of
brief, like
background?
who I am and what I do and all that
Yeah,
stuff. My
yeah.
name is Kirsten Flory. I am the president and CEO of Foundations Commercial Real Estate. I'm headquartered in Lawrence, Kansas. I get some people that actually locate in the state. They're like, "Why do you say Kansas after that?" I said, "Because there's plenty of people that don't are located in Kansas, so we need to identify that." But I'm a KU alum, so love the connection from the University of Kansas, and that's what brought me here. I grew up in Omaha, so there's something special about Lawrence, Kansas. So let's see. I've been in commercial real estate brokerage for 10 years. I started my own company right just under 2 years ago. And I think we'll probably talk about that here on the podcast. But I think what's probably interesting too, I also have a podcast. It's called The Small Business Mindset. And I think the podcast journey is a very interesting story, and I'm thrilled that the two of you are embracing this and taking a leap into getting into podcasting because I think it'll enhance your business presence and your reach wherever direction you go. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I really hope so. That's kind of one of the reasons we started the show is just to share like anecdotes from people like yourself who have like had all these experiences, whether it's starting a business or working post grad with students who have never experienced anything like that. And so I think kind of what I want to hit on first is we have a majority of our listeners who are kind of like Ryan and I, like in college, in undergrad. Maybe they just graduated, they're in their first job,
hmm
young professionals. What are a couple pieces of advice that you'd kind of give to somebody in our position, whether that be, especially like kind of with the considering you started your own business, like do you think you benefited from working at another business before doing that, or do you kind of recommend like if you want to start your own business, just do it right away? Like,
Right. Gosh, there's so many ways to go about it. And I would say the difference between someone that wants to start their own business and someone that doesn't, or maybe they don't know, it's the drive. It's a do you want to be your own boss? I do think there's a lot to be learned and be had if you start a career and just start sampling out different types of positions. I don't think there's no better knowledge and learning curve than if you can be in an industry learning from other people first because you learn what they did, how they put it together. If you think about just, innovation and technology that we've experienced in our lifetime, and I know I'm older than you, but just think about the leaps and bounds that have changed in social media and technology. And if you had to start back at the beginning when that all came to be, like when I came to college, the internet was kind of brand new and email was I mean, could you even imagine if you started college and, you got your first email address for the first time in your life? But we are leapfrog in like years ahead of where that is. So my advice to you is if you're currently in college or you're getting ready to start your career, take advantage of those opportunities first. Go work for somebody else. Learn the industry, sample the industry. Maybe you don't have a necessarily firm career path on like I want to go into this particular industry, get a whole host of different samples and I feel like then your path will open. I honestly didn't know that I wanted to own my own business till a little bit later after college. I mean, I know it was interesting to me and I think the just the leadership component and being in charge of that type of, you know, facilities. I mean, but I didn't know the path. I didn't know that it was going to be commercial real estate. So I think
yeah,
finding the vehicle for me took some time, and that's okay. But it's amazing that if you just start asking questions and taking those steps forward, the doors start opening for you. If you're open to possibilities, what cool things can come your way.
yeah, okay. That's awesome. I don't know if you
Oh,
saw the
look, there's my
foundations popped
logo.
on.
Woo!
So Kirsten started Foundations Commercial Real Estate, and that was after a kind of career working in commercial
It
real
is,
estate.
yeah.
So how often do you think people who start their own business do it in the same industry that they worked in, and then do you think it's kind of a nuance to maybe branch out? Like you've always had a passion for baking, and we're working commercial real estate, and then you
Right,
start a bakery. Like
right.
what? Yeah,
I think there's probably something similar in the same vein. So a little bit about my work history. I've been in real estate for 10 years. Prior to that, I was in the banking environment. So I did business development and, we kind of across the board so I got to learn the banking industry. I got to help start commercial lending. I got to understand all of those parameters. And I worked in that industry for 8 years. Prior to that, I worked in the marketing field. So I think stair stepping myself up through those career paths led me to opening my own business. Honestly, I was kind of surprised I landed in commercial real estate, and the story there is kind of funny. I was at the credit union that I work for and loved it. Had a great team, had great opportunities and, great mentors and all that kind of stuff. After 8 years, I kind of maxed out what I could do. And it was either I needed to move to the market where the credit union was headquartered, and that wasn't feasible for my life and my family at the time. And so we were kind of trying to figure out what's the next step for me, because I'm not someone that just sits around and just
Yeah.
is comfortable with that. No offense to people that are. Some people love to be in a job and just be comfortable and feel like they're providing value and then go home at the end of the day and turn it off or turn on to something else.
Hmm.
For me, I always wanted to be growing and evolving. So I had a friend and a colleague that approached me a number of years ago and said, "Would you ever consider commercial real estate?" And at first I said, "Oh, no, no, that's not for me." Because the fear was going from a salaried position where I knew exactly what I made and had great benefits to doing 100% commission. So it was kind of taking a big leap. It took me about 6 months to really evaluate, okay, what does this mean? What is the financial implication? The positive of it is that I can earn as much as I want to earn. That I mean,
Hmm.
we just took the cap right off of it versus being in a salary position. There are caps based on your position and your expertise level and where you can grow. So that was enticing for me, but it was also scared the crap out of me. So I needed some knowledge, and I think my brain always goes back to where's the analysis, where's the strategy, where's the potential. And so I took a deep dive into that particular industry, looked at the market, looked at the potential, looked at the income growth, all that kind of stuff, put my plan together. And that was kind of the start of my business plan for starting my own company. In doing that, at a deeper dive, not only financially, but market potential. How do I market myself? I was an independent contractor, which is kind of like owning your own business, because even though I was under the flag of a larger brokerage,
Yeah.
it was me. I literally hunt and what I kill. I mean, that's it. I get paid for what I bring in. So after 6 months, I'm like, okay, I think I have the plan together. And part of it included my husband and I sitting down and making sure we had enough in savings to sustain us, because I didn't get a paycheck for a while.
Yeah.
Um, Took the leap. So glad I did. But learning curve happened, and you have to make sure you understand the industry and where your clients are coming from. And then fast forward for me, and I know you and I kind of talked about this beforehand, COVID happened.
Yeah.
And COVID, I think in history, we'll go back in time and refer to those COVID years, and the next generation be like, what the heck are you talking about? But in, years 2020 and 2021, the world changed in lots of different ways.
Hmm.
But for me, it changed in business. And as an independent contractor that has always had the type of position throughout my career where I could work remotely if I wanted to, even though I was a salaried employee working for other people, I had a lot of flexibility because of the nature of my job. I did business development and strategies, and my time with my clients wasn't necessarily 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. It took place in lots of different ways. And so COVID time, when we were at home during quarantine, I think a lot of us, looked around our physical spaces and thought, I need to do this differently, or how do I enjoy spending my time, or who do I enjoy spending my time with?
Yeah.
But for me, it allowed me to say, how do I work most efficiently in my business? And how do my clients interact with me? Because we were forced to do non-in-person meetings. We had to do, a little more Zoom meetings or Microsoft Teams or Google Meetup and stuff like
Yeah.
that. And I had to educate a lot of my client base, which is a little older. I have lots of clients that are in their 70s,
Okay.
what that looked like and how do we engage differently and what the value of that communication is. I also had a chance to decide, how do I work best from a financial standpoint? What do I need to spend my money on and invest it in for my business that gets results? And what actually I can actually put to the side? What isn't valuable to me? So I dusted back off that business plan and refined it during COVID. And I thought, you know what? I've always had a desire to go out on my own. Maybe now's the time. And some people will think, gosh, you're kind of looking at a recessionary time in our
Yeah.
history. What are you doing starting a business? But my advice to you, that is the best time to start a business.
Okay.
Because if you can hit the ground running with a good plan, I'm not saying just willy nilly, just go throw something up and wing it.
Yeah.
Have a good plan. It's the best time to get started because the only place to go is up. You're
Yeah.
not hitting the top of the market. It's almost like buying a stock. You want to buy a stock when it's low, not when it's high. What a
Hmm.
great time to take advantage of the market. So I launched my company launched in the fall of 2021, and it's been amazing. I mean,
Okay.
scary at the same time,
Yeah, I imagine. But
but I think a lot of business, it's not necessarily those tactics. It's not like I have all the knowledge on the planet to analyze this, economic forecast. That's not what I'm saying, but I think more importantly, it's the people skills and the confidence and the ability to take risks and go out on your own. I mean, I look at you and Ryan, it's like you're starting a podcast
Yeah.
your sophomore year of college. That's
Mhm.
exemplary.
Okay.
And you are setting yourselves apart. And those are those tiny little micro movements that you're making that will enhance your career wherever you go, whether you start your own business or you work at to work for somebody else. You just leveled up your resume
Yeah.
more so than, if you could have taken all the courses and had all the experience you would. So it's just it's a fun process. But, advice to people, the original question, should you get started now or where should you go? Should you just start the
Yeah.
business? Maybe it's one and the same. If you have interest to start your own business, now's a great time to kind of give it a try and,
Okay.
do it, your point of entry doesn't need to cost you a whole lot, but just trying to figure out, what the vehicle is and what you need to learn still to make it successful.
Yeah. Kind of back to the COVID thing you were talking about, and that's one of the most interesting parts, I
Yeah,
think, of your story when I was looking at that. This is just how coronavirus affected commercial real
that's
estate.
cool. Right on.
And so I think number one, you were in a really interesting position.
Yeah.
Just being in commercial real estate,
Yeah.
everybody's out of the office,
Uh-huh.
everybody's kind of moving on. Did that play into the factor of you starting your own business? Were you kind of like, oh, like the company that I'm currently working with, like commercial real estate is kind of
Yeah.
like nobody, it was very unsteady.
It was unsteady in the sense that some deals got postponed.
Okay.
Um, some markets. So I am a market specialist, not a product specialist. So in commercial real estate, we work in office, retail, industrial, multifamily, land development, and investment properties. And so those are
Yeah.
kind of the wheelhouse. Um, in larger markets, meaning Kansas City is a tertiary market, it's not a major market, but LA, San Francisco, Chicago, Atlanta, New York, major markets. If you're in commercial real estate, you have to specialize because the market's too big for you to really get your arms around it. In Lawrence, Kansas, and really, and if I go western part of the state, I also work in Topeka and Wichita, Manhattan, things like that. Um, Not specializing in a product is where I found success because the market's small enough that I can understand most of the metrics that go with it. So even during COVID, where you saw retail and hospitality take a step back
Yeah.
because they couldn't stay open, restaurants couldn't stay open, and because of that,
Yeah.
and also office took a step back too because
Okay.
people were working from home. So, but what was being stable and elevating was industrial, warehousing space, logistics space, potential land development, and also believe it or not, even though office softened a little bit, there was a high propensity of investor buyers out there. So people that were stabilized, interest rates were still rock bottom low, and there was property to be had.
Yeah.
And so that's also, from a property purchase standpoint, a buyer investor standpoint, when you have a dip in the economy, that's a great time to buy property and then also redevelop property and stabilize it. Not every industry failed. Retail hospitality took a step back. People were working more from home from an office environment. But
Mhm.
believe it or not, office users still thrived because they still grew their client base. They still got a chance to create new products,
Okay.
and so it's just how they were using space a little differently. There was a study that was done a few years ago before COVID that talked about, okay, how much office space do employees need? Like, what's the typical space that they use? And it was around 250 square feet. So maybe something the size of this room that we're in.
Okay.
And you're like, okay, a private office for somebody. And that includes common area space and stuff like that. But on average, so right before COVID, the study was done again. And like, actually, we're shrinking our spaces down to about half the size, 125, square feet. And that was the emergence we saw over the last number of years of like farm table and co-working and stuff like that,
Yeah.
which really cool in theory because you can actually have more space for more people in a smaller footprint. But if you're trying to like get them to talk to each other, that it backfired. And who could have predicted that? Because, in the day and age of AirPods and headphones, even though we might be sitting right next to each other and assuming a physical space of something pretty small, we weren't collaborating like they thought we would. We wanted the privacy and we created it virtually.
Okay.
And so we're seeing that, as we come back into the office over the last couple years, we're seeing employers that do value the in-person collaboration. A lot of them are going to hybrid or having more flexible schedules, which is great. But they do see the value in having a physical seat and a desk for most of their staff.
Mhm.
It might be smaller. It might be more divided. They're kind of going away from the farm table cohabitating type of spaces to have some little more privacy. So that way, if heaven forbid COVID happens again, I don't think we're going to be that
Yeah.
environment, but I'm not
Yeah.
a health specialist,
Yeah.
but that they have some walls that they could construct to keep each other safe. So it's very interesting how that works. But you'll see industries throughout the history of time. Some industries will fall off and others will pop up. And it's fun to see the prediction of that.
Yeah.
Like in our area, um, Panasonic is getting ready to build a ginormous manufacturing plant for batteries, and it's a clean facility. And so when you think of manufacturing anymore in the olden days, I'm dating myself here,
Yeah.
manufacturing, you think of maybe, a dark and dusty plant, or something where, if you're an employee there, you're pushing a button or you're pushing a rack of something or you're doing some more manual labor.
Yeah.
Manufacturing nowadays is more automated and robotics are in place, but the type of employee needs to be a little different level. They need to be somebody that's higher skilled, that probably has head to toe a white suit on to
Yeah.
protect from any dust and particles. What a very different dynamic and type of worker they have than somebody that would be manufacturing, a product or in the car industry or in the food industry and stuff like that. So it's kind of fun to see the types of jobs that are adjusting that impact the type of space that people need.
Mm-hmm.
How's
That's
that for a long answer?
Yeah, I know. No, that's super important, and I think it's a relief to hear that, specifically commercial real estate kinda, like, found other avenues to
Yeah.
balance themselves, but, Sam, I think we have a slide on this of the new businesses that started in 2020.
Cool.
I think this
Okay.
is really interesting
Very
because
interesting.
it seems like such, like, a unsteady economic time, so, like, without looking at the charts, if I were to
Mhm.
predict, I would probably guess, like, oh, like, they dropped, like, nobody wanted to start a new business, everybody
Right.
was cool with whatever
Right.
job they were in right now. But I mean, if for some reason they nearly doubled, and I think you were a part of that spike, and so
Sure.
kind of being someone who has a firsthand account of that, I'd like to hear, like, what prevented you from being scared of COVID? I guess, like, is it that grit? Is it that ambition? Like, kind of
Oh
why?
gosh,
How'd
that's
you
a
do
good
that?
question. Um, I think I one of my favorite quotes is by Eleanor Roosevelt, and it says, "Do one thing every day that scares you." And I found that quote. I mean, obviously, she's been passed for a long time, and the quote was said a number of years ago. Um, but for me, that's something I came across. I mean, 15, 20 years ago. And I think if you are a growth minded person, risk is always part of your vocabulary and always part of your life. I don't think business ownership is for everybody. And I think if you do it well, you make it look easy. And people come to you and it's like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. How do I do that? How do I start a podcast? And you're like,
Yeah.
well, I will tell you the steps. But as you know, to actually take the leap and make it happen, that's where you separate yourself apart from people. Not everyone wants to do it. And so I love seeing this, and I love the seeing that people want to start businesses. So I think a couple things happened. I think there were a lot of PPP funds and government money that flooded the economy during
Mhm.
COVID, and I think that gave people an edge.
Yeah.
And I think you also saw people. I think we're very fortunate we live in the middle of the country, where housing costs are lower and the way we live is a little more affordable, and so you saw people that had the opportunity to work remotely and their company said you can work wherever you want to. They went to, they just said, great, I'm going to slash my housing price by half, and by doing so maybe I'm going to start something on the side.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave them the boost. It also gave them the time to do it. So, I mean, sometimes it doesn't cost a lot of money to start a business, but just having the time and the brain space to actually get that running, I think COVID afforded a lot of people that time. It afforded me the time because I was home more,
Yeah.
and I didn't have deals going on as actively as possible, and we couldn't show property, we couldn't do a lot of things. So there was a few months in there where I was like, okay, I'm either going to break a lot of sourdough bread, which that's not my thing. Make a lot of casseroles. I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
I did paint some rooms in my house, but it really got me thinking about like how can I use my time better and use it to elevate, my financial status or my goals and all that kind of stuff. So that's great, and we're still seeing the results of that because even though the government stimulus funds have tapered off, obviously, the people that have done well with that took that as an opportunity to be like, how can I reinvest it? Not to just, how can I go pay my bills? But take it as an opportunity and run with it.
Do you think that you kind of mentioned COVID
Yeah,
had some ways to accelerate business
sure.
formation? Do you think it would have been delayed had COVID not happened, or do you think you would have started your own company?
Oh, that's a good question. I think eventually I would have done it,
Okay.
but I think I needed a push.
Yeah.
Sometimes stuff happens that makes you go, okay, let's rethink this. And I think that's for all of us in our life. Something happens that makes you go, I'm tired of not taking the next step. What's
Mhm.
gonna make me take the next step? And what is it gonna mean and how's it gonna look? And what's in it for me? So yeah, sometimes I do think COVID, if not for COVID, I probably wouldn't have started that soon.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's just definitely changed your life up to now.
It's kind of
Obviously,
cool.
it's your occupation right now, but you're
Right.
also kind of an inspiration to other people who want to start their own business. I didn't know you're a mentor in the Catalyst program.
Yeah.
The Catalyst program is basically, I think we have another slide on this actually. So I'm just going to read this because I couldn't memorize it. But the Catalyst encourages entrepreneurship and professional development through mentoring. It gives students the opportunities to work out ideas and venture plans with input from industry mentors. So, what is your position mentoring a student who's starting their own business? What does that look like?
Yeah. And I love that I got invited to be a mentor in this program because I think the one thing that helps me learn for my business and accelerates me
Yeah.
is getting to share my story. But more importantly, I want to get feedback from your generation because your perspective on life and business and goals and just overall vision is different than mine. I
Hmm.
mean, I'm a middle-aged mom and I have a daughter that's your age, so thinking about,
Yeah.
my perspective is a lot different than your perspective. And I always want to be relevant and be thinking, okay, what are trends that you're looking at that I'm not seeing? Because maybe I don't live that every day. And I do, but I'm also still have quite a bit of my career left. So I need to be relevant and I need to be timely and I need to be thinking about, trends in how you work and how you live and what do you use and where do you go and what's interesting to you. So that's what's been very cool for me. And then I just want to learn about people. Okay, where are you going to take this? Like you have this idea. Tell me why. Why is this idea important to you? What do you want to do with it? What is your goal here? And trying to connect the dots a little bit. So I got to talk with students that had a variety of different entrepreneurial ideas, which was
Yeah.
really cool.
Uh-huh.
And just help them kind of rip it apart and dig down a little bit and have that engagement, which is just as beneficial to me, I hope, as it was to them.
Yeah. Did you
Yeah.
have kind of mentors like yourself? Like you're a mentor to them. Did you have that when you were starting a business or?
Yes and no.
Okay.
I would say I built a team around me of outside mentors, and I did that actually before I got into commercial real estate. So when I was in banking and thinking about making the switch,
Yeah.
I sat down with my CPA, I sat down with an attorney, and I sat down with my insurance agent, and we had this big long conversation about like, okay, if I'm going to take a leap and be self-employed, what does that mean? What does
Yeah.
that look like? What are my risks? And that was my team, and they're still my team today. And anytime I have a major, and when I launched my company, I'm like, okay, do we need to revisit this? Where am I exposed? How do I need to be designed and whatever? Um, on the side of just having the gut and the grit to go after it,
Yeah.
I think that's more of a marketing branding side, and that's just I've worked with a number of life and executive coaches throughout my career.
Hmm.
One who's somebody here locally, and their name is Jay Pryor. And Jay is somebody that has really been instrumental for me in my career and getting me to think deep and hard about who I am, where I want to
Definitely.
be, where my value is, how I can up level that, and then taking it and turning it into a brand. So that's been really cool. So I would say, and mentors absolutely in my career, but a lot of my mentors weren't business owners. And so
Yeah.
I think business ownership is a little even more of a unique thread because my CPA is not the owner of the business, my attorney is not so trying to find people in your lane is sometimes difficult. And so I don't know a lot of people that own their own real estate brokerages. I know a lot of people that are brokers that work
Yeah.
under a flag.
Uh-huh.
So what I found success is that working with people that maybe either have a big leadership role or are entrepreneurs in a totally different industry. Maybe they own a restaurant, maybe they own that. Because a lot of the logistics and the goal planning is similar. Because if you're forecasting, you're planning for employees, you're planning for market growth, you're planning for, how are you expanding and making sure you're relevant in your marketplace. So that's always a great conversation. And a lot of those people that I lean on in that mentorship world, they don't live here. I mean, they're all over the country. So we have a remote relationship, but we collaborate, regularly.
Yeah. So spread your network kind of
Spread your
and
network and
rely on those people. But you made an
yeah.
interesting point. I think sometimes it's hard to find other, successful, especially business owners
Yep.
to kind of mentor you because number one, there are a lot of businesses that start and then they realize it's not for them or the market's not good. Just one
Right.
thing doesn't work out and then they're
Yes.
no longer a business owner. But I was listening to the most recent episode of your podcast actually, and you mentioned that it takes like a special kind of like person to be okay with the fact that they might not get a paycheck for the first 6 to
Yeah.
9 months.
Ooh.
Um, like, that seems scary. So, like, how do you overcome that fear? Because that's just one of many fears when you're starting a business.
Absolutely. I mean, the money thing, people
Yeah.
want to get paid.
I mean, yeah,
We want to put food on the table and pay your rent, right?
uh-huh.
For me, it's having a really good plan
Okay.
and having the backup plan of the backup plan. And so when I made the switch, and at the time, I mean, I still have a mortgage and
Yeah.
I'm married and I have 2 kids and a car payment and all those things.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate my spouse also works full time and makes a nice living and has
Mhm.
benefits, thank goodness. But we are a 2 income household. We don't survive on one income.
Mhm.
And so my husband and I sat down and really took a look at our budget. And we took a look at our savings. We took a we took out a home equity line of credit on our house just to have that cushion.
Yeah.
And those are still things I have in place today. Even as a small business owner, it's one thing if, I even have 10,000 in the bank or 100,000 in the bank in savings. I have this conversation a lot with startup businesses because a lot of times they come to me first because they see, I'm going to use an example of a restaurant. And
Okay.
let's say, and I've used this before on my podcast. Let's say you're phenomenal at making donuts
Okay.
and you make this really cool custom donut with all the flavors and you've made it in your home kitchen and your friends come over and they enjoy it and maybe you cater some parties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm ready to take the leap. And so they know their craft. They know how to make the donut. They know how to make it really well and they have a great product. But what they don't know is all the other things that comes with owning a business. Maybe they don't know how to incorporate themselves or what their tax ramifications are or how to best project for inventory
Mhm.
so they can fulfill orders. But a lot of times I'll get a call, excuse me, I'll get a call from a donut, proprietor that says, okay, I'm ready to open my first shop. I said, great, but they haven't done any of the research yet.
Yeah.
So they come to me because they want to open up the space. And usually if they're in that industry, they're a donut maker, restaurateur, they want to be on Mass Street in downtown Lawrence because that's the cool place to be. Who doesn't want to be there? Of course, perfect spot. But they reach out to me because it's the sexy thing to do. I
Mhm.
want to see the space. So we get in the space, we start talking through things. A lot of times they haven't put the business plan together. So even though we talk about what the rent expectation is financially, you're going to pay, I'm going to use some rough numbers, you're $1,000 a month. But what they want to do, and I appreciate their creativity, they're like, but okay, the space needs new lighting and new flooring, and I got to redo the counter and on and on and on and on. Well, all of a sudden, they just created $100,000 worth of improvements that they don't have, and the landlord's not going to give it to them. So maybe they go into debt to do this, but they haven't made a dime yet. And so what I always encourage people to do is start lean. Start with a bare bones budget
Mhm.
that gets you leveled up so that way you can, start making some money. Because the last thing you want to do is have all this debt coming into your opening day and then you have nothing. So, I mean, so not having a paycheck for 6 months, what
Yeah.
does that look like? But, creating a pipeline and a runway for when does that first check hit? When are you happening with that? I know at any given time for me, when I started in real estate, I didn't have any clients yet, but I had a big network.
Okay.
And just like you're doing some pre-launch stuff with your podcast, you want to do that teaser. You want to say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm doing this." I mean, if you can, obviously, if you're working for somebody else, you can't just say, promote your new business.
Uh-huh.
But getting it out there and start kind of pre-marketing yourself, building those relationships, asking the questions. And I think the most powerful thing you can do if you're starting a business is going asking other people for advice. Because
Okay.
if you start asking them questions, tell me more about this, tell me more about this. They've just created a bond with you because they feel like people love to help other people and give advice. And if you can get them into your philosophy and help them build that brand with you, when you're ready to launch, they'd be like, oh my gosh, yes, I get where they're going. They have a plan and they know what's happening and all
Yeah.
that stuff. So back to the donut shop, if this person doesn't have the capital or doesn't have not just the capital to get started, but the capital to sustain them for the first 6 months or a year as they're getting up and running, I suggest let's start a little smaller. Let's back it up a minute. Maybe you don't start in downtown Lawrence because you can't afford it yet.
Yeah.
Maybe you start somewhere else and you start small, but with the power of social media and the power of photographs and the power of just getting word of mouth out there and getting those referrals, you're going to get to move to Mass Street at some time, or maybe you never will because maybe you have 3 other locations that run your business really well. So it's just rolling with it, but also being conservative enough in your approach because the last thing I hate is when businesses fail.
Yeah.
And so during COVID, the businesses that failed within the first 30 to 60 days, and they're, sometimes they're restaurants or whatever, it wasn't because they had to close their doors. It was because they didn't prepare themselves financially enough. Those businesses, quite honestly, would have failed in the first year.
Okay.
Because I'm like, if you can't keep your doors open, I mean, if you have to close your doors for 30 to 60 days and your business fails, you're doing something wrong. You were
Yes.
doing something way wrong. So set yourself up from the beginning, so that way you can ride the wave. Because, in commercial real estate, I might not get a paycheck for 6 months. That's not the case anymore. I mean, I have a
Yeah.
pipeline, but prepare for that. But in other forms of business, if I didn't, then what? I mean, could I still afford to keep the doors open? That's a great question to ask you, and do it in a way where you're not causing yourself tons of risk, but you're betting on yourself.
Okay. That's super valuable information.
Yeah.
All this talk about donuts, I think, made me hungry, and so I think if
And this
you've
cool
listened,
water
oh
we
yeah, and the
have.
cool water, we got really cool. Thank you for that. I'm sure they'll appreciate that.
I didn't hit my nose, so that's good.
Yeah. So if you've watched the show before, you know that we usually try a Pickleman sandwich on the show. So I think we're gonna get into that if you don't mind, Ryan.
Yeah.
I think Ryan and I got a turkey one. Kirsten, do you remember what you ordered?
I think I got a turkey club.
Turkey club.
Or no, Italian club?
Italian club. I'm
I
pretty
don't
sure
know.
that was it.
Pickleman's makes a
No
heck.
tomatoes. No
No
tomatoes.
tomatoes. Pickleman's makes an amazing toasty sandwich. My husband and I were
Okay.
talking about this the other day
Okay.
because we have favorites that are on the menu.
Sorry.
And to put a plug in for Pickleman's, they deliver locally.
Oh,
So cool.
all right. Deliver if you live in Lawrence.
If you live in Lawrence, I don't know where else they're located, but
There we
thank
go. All right.
you.
So
Okay.
usually we ask a couple fun questions during this segment.
Yeah.
Yeah, hop in.
So, let me turn the mic on. While you guys were podcasting, I went on the Instagram at SmarterPod. Please follow it. And I asked for people to send in questions, and got a great question from Ryan Lanouette. You don't have to answer it right away, but just think about it. He said, people always give advice on what to do to build a successful career. What about what not to do?
Ooh, that's a good one.
So you can.
So
it's a tough
do you think,
one.
are you interpreting this as like building a business or just building a career?
I think it could go either way.
I mean, yeah, there's probably
in
some
general.
overlap there.
But yeah, maybe just some things either you have done where you're like, should not have done that.
Yep. Yep.
Everyone does that. Everyone fails. But yeah, something to ponder while we eat this amazing picklemans.
Oh gosh, I know. It looks so good.
Okay.
First thing off the top of my head, I know our business environment and our environment in general has got a lot more casual by the way we dress and by the way we present ourselves. And if I can give you any advice, always show up like you're meeting with somebody with $1 million or more. I mean, show up like you want it. Even though, I mean, I meet with plenty of people where they're in jeans and work boots and we're looking at a warehouse that's dirty. But the thing is, if you want to be taken seriously, especially at a younger age, I would say, I mean, it's kind of the old dress for success, but even if you're wearing jeans, make sure the jeans are clean. Make sure, they're not wrinkled and like you drug them out from under your bed, and making sure your shoes are clean and in good condition. I don't care. I mean, you have great tennis shoes on today, but that's the style.
Yeah.
But I would say just level it up a little bit. Look like you care. I mean, make sure, this is awful, make sure you're showered and you smell good and, you look nice. Your nails are groomed.
Kirsten, are you trying to say something?
No, you look great. You both look great. But so here's an example.
Mm-hmm.
When I worked for the credit union a number of years ago, one of my responsibilities, I was in charge of like sponsorships and marketing. And I had a young lady come to my office, and she was pitching me. I can't remember what it was. It was like a calendar or something like that. And she was a college student and was working for this national organization to sell these ads. And she comes in my office, and she was cute, but she was, how can I say this, over the top, like ooh la la, sexy, like she was going out to the nightclub.
Yeah.
But she presented well. She spoke well. And she left, and then she followed up about a week later, and I said, this is not for us. And she surprised me, and I'm so glad she asked. She's like, what could I have done better? And I said, okay, I'm going to be totally honest with you, because I think if I was you, I'd want to hear this. And I said, your outfit is great for a club, but it is way too revealing and provocative. And I'm a female, so I'm not a guy oogling at you, but
Yeah.
I don't even want to be put in that position. I said, I would suggest you have a professional flair about you, making sure that reflects in your brand and how you're presenting yourself. And like I said, it doesn't have to be fancy clothes. You don't have to spend a lot of money on your clothes, but paying attention to how you show up is huge.
Mhm.
Eye contact is huge. I know, especially when I was younger, and even nowadays, you go into situations where you feel intimidated.
Yeah.
I'm in a male-dominated industry. Only about 15% of women are in commercial brokerage. Now, the exact opposite is the same for residential, but I deal with a lot of high-powered men. And it used to honestly scare the crap out of me when I walked into the room and I would see a bunch of guys in suits that were probably a lot older than me and had this kind of like, cross arm looking at me. I'm like, how do I do this? If you are confident and you exude that, you know what you're talking about, that's all they want. You don't have to be an expert. You don't have to have all the answers. But I think if you can provide value to the situation by way of, here's my opinion. They want your opinion. Don't be afraid to ask and say that. Just say, my advice here is to do this. I suggest we go in that direction. And don't get pissed if they don't like your idea.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think what will set yourself apart and and the question was, what shouldn't you do? Don't stay silent. Don't sit in the back of the room, but also don't be cocky either. I mean, don't try to tell everyone what to do and get mad if they don't do it. But
Right.
offer a good, valid opinion, ask good questions, and be present and show up. And then the second thing that I think is just as important, follow up. What drives me insane is when I'm trying to get a hold of somebody, even if it's not a fit, I just want to know that they've acknowledged my message. They got, the voicemail, the text, the whatever. I got you. And then, even if it's a no, I respond. Thank you very much, but this isn't for me. Or just the fact that, if someone makes a request of you, hey, I'd really like you to bring those numbers back to me, next week. Great. Well, then come hell or high water, you better have those numbers back to them by next week.
Mhm.
If you think about, under promise, over deliver. If you say, I will respond to you by tomorrow at noon, you better move everything on earth to make sure you respond tomorrow at noon. Otherwise, your integrity just went down the toilet.
Yeah.
So I would say present yourself well, ask great questions, be attentive and be engaged, and then follow up. Because believe you me, I gain more business in my world because people don't follow up. People don't follow up. And I have colleagues that make 5 times what I do, and I do well.
Yeah.
And these are older guys that wear suits. They don't return phone calls. And it blows my mind. And I'm like, you just missed out on this great opportunity because you didn't have the courtesy to follow up.
Mhm.
What in the world? So, I mean, I know the bar's low, but come
Yeah.
on,
Yeah. Yeah. Follow up.
follow up.
Is that
So
right?
yeah, so Ryan, to answer your question, don't wear a sexy nightclub dress in a business setting.
Yeah.
And I don't mean to be sexist there. Oh my gosh. But
But the same probably goes for a guy, like showing up in a t-shirt maybe, or
Right.
some
No,
dirty
yeah.
clothes. Yeah.
not at all.
Okay.
Making sure, your clothes are not wrinkled. This is a good sandwich. I would say, but level it up. I mean, people sometimes give me a hard time. They're like, you're so overdressed. I'm like, you know what? If I want to have a successful business and make 7 figures plus, I better dress like I know what I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
But also be mindful. I mean, you don't have to overspend on that. There's plenty of great options that are very affordable that make you look great.
Yeah. All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Kirsten. That was great. One thing I kind of wanted to know while we're eating Picklemans, while we're kind of just casually, like, what intrigues you about Lawrence? Like, why do you stay in Lawrence?
Oh, yeah.
And I want to know that just because I'm from Denver myself, and I came
Yeah.
out here to Kansas, and Lawrence is great. It's a
Mhm.
college town, but I just like kind of what brought you here and what kept you here.
So I came here to go to the University of Kansas out of high
Yes.
school. I didn't think I would stay. I think I'd get through college and then I'd move somewhere. I'd take a job somewhere. I fell in love. My husband's from here.
Yeah.
But there is something cool about Lawrence. And I think that's what drew me to it in the first place when I was looking at colleges.
Mm-hmm.
I looked at colleges all over the country. And I think for me, yeah, I wanted, a variety of a degree program. I changed majors a few times. Believe it or not, I started out as a pre-med major. Well, that kind of changed. I think I was looking at for a liberal arts university. What drew me to Lawrence, I think, was the vibe. We tend to be in a little more liberal part of the state,
Mm-hmm.
which I think is interesting to me.
Yeah.
I like diversity of thought. I like diversity of people, diversity of business. And I think that's what spoke to me. And even though I'm in a very capitalistic kind of business, I do like to perform my business in a way where I'm open to new ideas and diversity and inclusion.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that's extremely important to me. And so I think that's what makes Lawrence very enticing to me to run a business out of.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm gonna set this down. This something.
It's good, or I'm going to get it all over my lap.
I
here.
can take. Oh, you got it.
Cool. Yeah,
All
we're
right.
good.
We're good. Now you did touch on a part there about kind of like exemplifying your values
Mm-hmm.
in the business that you start, whether it be where you're headquartered, like we are just talking about, or some of the things that you kind of implement into your business. Have you ever found a way where maybe you think that the more profitable option would be to do one thing, but it goes against your values? And then what do you think is the kind of balance between having like your values be exemplified in the business and
Mm-hmm.
also trying to like make that bottom line?
Gosh, that's a great question. If I moved to Kansas City, I could make more money in a heartbeat.
Really?
If I worked in commercial real estate in a larger market, oh yeah,
And
hands down.
you're perfectly fine with being aware of that and staying in Lawrence?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Because I think about, when you think about lifestyle, and I know nowadays people are intimately thinking about lifestyle, whatever age you are, because again, COVID forced us to think about that. And I think how we spend our time every day is very important. Whether your time at home, your time with your family, your friends, your social life, your environment, the causes you support are just as important as the money you make.
Okay.
And if you can find a way to blend that and capitalize on that, oh my gosh, you just hit the gold mine. But for me, it's about, and I tell my clients this too, I never let a commission get in the way of a deal. And what I mean by that is that if I am working with somebody and we decide, okay, maybe they're not ready to pursue property, but I just spent all this time. And maybe we have an agreement in place that they need to pay me regardless. It's more important for them to be successful than for me to be successful, because as they level up, I level up.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it's a learning experience. Now, it doesn't happen all that often, but it has happened over my career where I've spent in some respect months or a year with somebody investigating and strategizing and figuring that all out. And I don't get a paycheck at the end of the day because whatever the circumstances were, it didn't happen. But in every instance, I've learned something and they've learned something. And I always want to leave people with, okay, what's the next step for you? I provided you with something with value. Because what I've seen in my business, if I do that, if I approach the world with, I'm here to provide value and I'm here to learn,
Mm-hmm.
then my business will grow because of that. And it's a different way to approach business. I'm in a sales environment. And I would say the last company I worked for had a little bit different mentality on that. I mean, yes, they were community minded, absolutely. But at the end of the day, it was all about the bottom line. How much money are you bringing into the company?
Yeah.
And even though, yeah, that's how we get paid. And I want to, I feel like the more money you are able to make in your life, for me, it's the more money I get to give away. And that's a little bit different philosophy. Not the more money I get to keep and just pad my pocket, but the more money I get to help people in my community. Always been my goal. So I think about, as you think about your financial goals for your own personal life or those that are listening today, what does the value of money mean to you? And does earning more change that?
Wow.
That's a deep question to ask
Yeah.
yourself, and because some people I've talked to, friends and colleagues and mentors, some people are really into cars. Like my thing is collecting really cool, expensive cars. That might be their thing. My thing is traveling. My thing is time, not to work. So where does money fall in for you? For
Mm-hmm.
me, it was about living comfortably enough that I have the creature comforts, but maybe I don't have the biggest, best of everything. I don't live in a ginormous house, but I get to take time off and go to the beach with my family and I get to pay for that. Or, I get to give, to charity and I get
Yeah.
to do those kinds of things and see my community grow. So that's where my perspective comes from that.
Okay. That's amazing. And I think, as we wrap up here, there are a couple overarching kind of topics, kind of values that we've talked about today that we've had the chance to hear from you. And so if you could kind of sum everything up into just, I know I asked you like right off the bat, like, what's your advice for like students like
Yeah.
me and Ryan, but like, do you just like what's the most important piece of advice you've gotten over your career? Or what's something that you think is kind of lacking in
Mm-hmm.
the current environment?
Mm-hmm. I think when you're in your 20s, and your life is ahead of you, it's pretty intimidating. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, where do I go from
Yeah.
here? And I'm saying you don't have to have a decision made. And a lot of it is if you're open to the possibilities, sometimes it's scary. I'm sure it's scary to your parents. They're like, what I tell my daughter, I'm like, okay, so what's the path and
Yeah.
how are we getting to, an employable place where you can be self-sufficient? I mean, I don't care how much money she makes, but I'm like, so she can be financially stable and financially independent, but is doing something that fills you with joy, and that allows you to be a good person and in your community and stuff like that. I think there's a big combination of both, and I think taking this time in your life to try it on, and ask questions.
Yeah.
But also take it a step further. Don't just let the job, because you're like, okay, I'm going to go work for, such and such industry and I'm going to do this thing and I make this much. But outside of those working hours, how are you growing? How are you plugging in? Because sometimes those opportunities might lead to career growth,
Okay.
even more so than your day-to-day job. Or you might find a synergy between your social interests and your community interests. Do they align with your corporate interests? Can they be combined? Can that be something that enhances what you do? And so I would say just be open to the journey. And it's hard to say when you're in your 20s, like, what is my life going to look like in 20 years? I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had no idea I would be here,
Okay.
but I was open to the journey and open to having the conversations. Always be curious about where you're going and learning about people and learning about expectations and environments and opportunities. And, take that and go with it and share it with people.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. It sounds really simple, when you say it, but then it's
Right.
like you gotta like incorporate it into your life
Yeah.
and figure out ways to use it. But I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate your time today. It
Absolutely.
was amazing.
This is fun.
Thank you. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to take a second to thank our sponsors. If you want to throw that up, we have 4 sponsors, Kirsten.
Wow.
We have the KU Bookstore, Boxwater, Pickleman's, as we saw, and then Johnny's Tavern.
So cool.
So we have a little gift for you. The KU Bookstore they like to donate a piece of merchandise
I
every
love it.
show. And we also have a gift card to Pickleman's and Johnny's for you.
Wow. All
and
great
so,
places.
Yes, they're amazing places.
Yes.
So thank you so much for being on the show. And
Thanks,
I
Cooper.
really appreciate it.